So, for the moment, I'm about 75% done the first game for the secret project that I'm working on. That's what I got the code up for on screen right now. It's amazingly hard to make some of the simplest things sometimes. So you have such a great idea going on, and you're cooking through it, you're getting all kinds of code done, and then you come to some part of it that seemed so simple on paper. And then you go to code and it's like, this is one of the hardest things I've ever tried to code. The funny thing is that a lot of people, when they start playing games, they usually have at least some little bit of an inclination as to wanting to actually make games. But then they actually go to attempt it and they realize, oh hell, this is a hell of a lot harder than I thought it would be. And then the average person doesn't try again. But for those of us who did keep going, it's like, I have all of these great ideas. I have a folder dedicated to game designs. It literally has like 250 plus documents in it, each one being an idea I've had over the years, starting since, when did I start documenting these things? I think it was like 1997 when I started actually writing game docs. One of my ideas is that I wanted to work on is an RPG. It's got a unique battle system to it, but other than that, there's nothing that really makes it stand out. So it's something that would be fun, but again, it's not something that's too unique or stand out or anything. And then another one of my ideas is to make Pixel Ships 2 finally, and I actually came up with a really good way of doing the system for that a while back. But again, it's a 2D shooter. It's gotta compete with other 2D shooters that are out there. And there's, yeah, it has the whole ship collecting aspect, but other than that, there's nothing fundamentally unique about it. This project that I'm working on, there's nothing out there like this right now. That's why I have to make it. But before I get too far off track here, the thing is that I was thinking back to many of the projects that I worked on in the past, and I loaded up one of my old backup CDs, and I'm amazed at just how much stuff I'd actually started making and then didn't finish or didn't get very far in the first place. Because there's always something better. Like, that's one of the pitfalls of being a game designer in general, is that you always feel like you gotta perfect your idea, but the problem is, the more you try to perfect your idea, the longer it takes to actually get any progress made in that idea. So there's like the danger of game design. You have to know when to cut your losses and be like, this design works, this is what I gotta go with. To that end, there was actually a couple things I ran across going through my old archive of programming stuff, and I noticed a couple things that I never really share with people, but it's kind of interesting stuff, so I figure maybe it's time to show you guys. This right here is a little program I wrote in Visual Basic quite a while back called LifeSpace. Now, if it looks kind of familiar, it's because it really is using the life algorithm that was developed quite a while back. It's basically a mathematical algorithm based on a grid of cells, and the idea is that when you're scanning the entire grid, any cell that is touching at least 3 cells that are active, but no more or less, that cell itself will become active. But to stay active, it needs to be touching 2 or 3 cells at a time. But one of the ideas I had when I was younger was perhaps doing some kind of life algorithm program that was kind of like an exploration almost. And what I came up with was what you're seeing right here, where you basically punch in a word of some kind or even a phrase, add a number to it, and it will randomly generate the different cells, which you can then process and then see what the end result is after as many generations have gone past as possible. And it has different like color effects and such, so it kind of names the reaction after the color palette it's using, and then gives it sizes and actually analyzes what's left and provides names for all the different cell positions and everything. The names that are used here are my own personal names. They're not the actual names that are used for these objects that are created by the life algorithm. I think some of them might be related, but they're the names that I gave them, so that's why some of them might seem a little weird. Essentially, I just kind of wrote this thing as like a time waster. It's just not something I really intended to release to anyone, so that's probably why I got lost in my archives. No, what you're looking at is not an altered version of Deluxe Paint. It's actually a program I was working on called Pixit. And it's basically a program that was meant to replace Deluxe Paint as my pixel pusher of choice. I don't know why I stopped working on this thing. I think what ended up happening was that I realized I was spending so much time working on this thing that could have been spent just making graphics in Deluxe Paint in general that I just figured, why am I going through all this effort? Like, what am I going to get out of doing this? Became even more superfluous when I finally figured out how to hack the font files in Deluxe Paint so I could put my own fonts in it. And then, other than that, there wasn't really going to be any major features that this was going to offer me above Deluxe Paint. I think the one other thing that, the reason why I wanted to make this thing was that Deluxe Paint 2e has memory limitations, specifically when you're working in the SVGA modes. So what ends up happening is if you try to like grab a brush that's of a certain size or larger, it'll just be like, nope, can't do that. So being able to write my own program like this, I was able to bypass those kinds of memory restrictions. But then at the same time, I'm having to basically reinvent the wheel every step of the way. So making this thing was a neat idea for sure. It's just, I already had a program to do everything this was going to do, so that's why I never finished it. Now this program I can't even get running properly, but I do actually have quite a substantial code base for this thing already. And this was a project I was making called CGA Solar Warriors. So what you're seeing right now is actually conceptual screenshots that I had made to sort of guide my progress towards making this thing. The idea was to make a game with CGA graphics that actually was a game that could be played and everything. So it was going to be like this whole space exploration things with randomized missions and planets and such. And I actually made decent progress in the engine itself, and I had gameplay going, you could warp to other sectors. I didn't have the weapons working, I did have maneuvering working and everything. I had animated stars going, there were like many different kinds of stars and they would take up like the entire screen sometimes. But what ended up stopping me on this project was the fact that I ran into a brick wall with how I had designed my engine. And the only way to incorporate certain things was to essentially rewrite like 75% of the code. So I basically just was like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm just... That's one of the things I don't like about programming in general, is just when you end up in a situation where you have to redo work. Because to me, it's a waste of time when you have to redo something. To me, it's like you should get it right the first time so that you don't have to waste time doing it again. So that's why it always bothers me when like a program crashes and I have to redo like the past hour worth of stuff that I was doing. Or if I'm playing a game where you can only save between levels and you lose like 20 minutes into a level or an hour into a level, and you have to go all the way back and do all of that again. It's like, that kind of stuff frustrates me a lot. Now, this one here is kind of something that I never really meant to be like some full program that people would use, but it's basically something I called Equato Picto. I don't know why I called it that, but the idea is that, well, it's kind of hard to explain. Like, I mean, let me just show you here. You can see it's just a whole bunch of random pixels. But just trust me on this. Give this a minute. It's starting to look a little interesting yet. So we figured out what's going on. You see, what's happening is that the whole area has been splashed with random pixel colors, but the pixels don't actually change. What ends up happening here is that pixels have to swap positions with other pixels that they're right next to, but they tend to do it in a direction towards pixels of the same color. So sooner or later, little tiny groups of pixels start to form together in like clusters and everything, and those clusters end up attracting more pixels to it. And it creates these kinds of weird patterns that happen. It's actually kind of a weird thing to look at. It takes a while for these reactions to happen. Like, I mean, I even have it set up in here so that you can do it with 64 colors in total. And I left it overnight, figuring that it would take forever to do its thing. And then I came back the next morning and looked at it, and all 64 colors really had separated out. So it's a very interesting kind of reactionary sort of thing. I didn't really get to do too much with this thing. It was just something fun to do. Like, just for an example, here it is with just 2 colors, just so you can get an idea of just what this thing is up to. Now, you may actually think the thing is done, but believe it or not, it still has a little trick up its sleeve. Now the thing's pretty much done. So yeah, it's kind of depressing looking back at these old projects because I could have taken them further if I really wanted to, but then it's ultimately like, where do you want to end up when you're done at the end of the day doing all your code and everything? And where I want to end up is being able to sustain my own living off of doing stuff like this. And the only way I can reach that goal is if I make stuff that I know is going to have at least some sort of appeal in some way. And based on my own experience, I know that the more unique your stuff is, the more likely people will gravitate to it, especially if it's something that's inexpensive and easy to play. So that's why I gotta make this secret project of mine, because it's something that is going to be unique, that nobody else is doing. That means people may enjoy it. May. It's possible. Like, I mean, maybe people won't enjoy it and it will bomb terribly, and it's like, maybe I have no right to make anything ever again. But the thing is that I have to try it, right? So, yeah. Basically, that's what I've been up to. Aside from ancient DOS games, of course. And, yeah. I'll get there. Actually, my camera battery's dying, despite the fact it said it had 43 minutes left, so I better cut this short. So, see you guys later. So yeah, it's kind of depressing looking back at these old an RPG, which is like, you know, it's gonna blend in with